If your pension fund lost its risk dashboard tomorrow morning, there is a reasonable chance it would be because of a single piece of software you have never heard of. It is called Aladdin. It is built by BlackRock, and it processes risk on $21 trillion in assets. That is more than the GDP of the United States and China combined. If Aladdin went offline tomorrow, pension funds managing the retirement savings of millions of people would lose their risk dashboards. Central banks overseeing hundreds of billions in sovereign reserves would go dark. Insurance companies, sovereign wealth funds, and more than 200 major institutions would be flying blind. CalPERS, Deutsche Bank, the Bank of Israel, all of them run their investment operations through this one platform. And 98% of the institutions that start using it never stop. Not because of a contract clause, because leaving is structurally almost impossible. This is how one piece of software became the operating system for global finance, how it got there, why nobody can leave, and what happens if it ever goes down. The entire system exists because of a massive career-ending failure. In 1986, a bond trader named Larry Fink miscalculated a bet on interest rates at First Boston. He lost roughly $100 million overnight. Rather than disappear from Wall Street, Fink became obsessed with a single question. How do you map the risk of a financial disaster before it detonates? That obsession led to BlackRock. In 1988, Fink and 7 partners founded the firm. Their first employee, a 24-year-old named Charles Halleck, bought a single Sun Microsystems workstation and set it up between a refrigerator and a coffee machine in their one-room office. That workstation was the first version of Aladdin. Halleck and co-founder Bennett Golub built the earliest risk models by hand. They were pricing collateralized mortgage obligations, the same class of instrument that had wrecked Fink's career at First Boston. The logic was straightforward. If you could model the risk accurately enough before the trade, you could avoid the catastrophe that created BlackRock in the first place. For 6 years, the system stayed internal. Then, in 1994, General Electric hired BlackRock to price the mortgage portfolio of its subsidiary, Kidder, Peabody & Company, one of the most complex in the world. The initial data arrived on what analyst Rob Goldstein called the Michelle spreadsheet, over 1,000 rows of trades, delivered on Halloween 1994. BlackRock priced the entire thing. Kidder was sold shortly after. That job changed everything. The firm began selling daily risk reports to outside clients, printed on green paper. People in the industry called them the green package. By the late 1990s, a client asked BlackRock to install the system directly at their offices. That client gave it a name: Aladdin, short for Asset Liability Debt and Derivative Investment Network. In 2000, the first full external installation was complete, and BlackRock Solutions launched to license it commercially. Rob Goldstein took over leadership of the platform around 2009 and is now BlackRock's Chief Operating Officer. The risk engine born from a $100 million mistake was now a product. But most people get the story wrong, and not in the direction you think. They hear $21 trillion and assume BlackRock controls all of it. That framing actually undersells what is happening. Aladdin does not need to make trades. It does not need to pick stocks. It does not need to move money. Because it did something more permanent. It replaced the operating system. When 200 institutions run their risk, their trading, their compliance, and their accounting through one platform, you do not need to control decisions. You are the infrastructure the decisions run on. When Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, part of the disaster was that firms could not see their own exposure across fragmented systems. Aladdin is what got built after that lesson. One unified view, one data model, one platform. Not a conspiracy, an architecture. An architecture is harder to escape than any conspiracy would be, and that is where the lock-in begins. Before Aladdin, a typical large investment firm ran 5 to 10 separate software systems. Risk analytics on one platform, portfolio management on another, trading execution on a third. Compliance had its own system. Accounting ran on something else entirely. Each stored data in its own format, spoke its own language, and required its own engineering team to maintain. David Schneid, who oversees Aladdin's accounting division, described the result as a spaghetti bowl. Dozens of fragile connections between systems that were never designed to talk to each other. Imagine trying to untangle a wiring closet where each cable is $1 billion trade. Aladdin replaces all of it. One platform, one data model. Everything uses the same numbers, updates in real time, and sits in one place. The spaghetti bowl disappears, but so does the redundancy. If that single platform ever failed, there is no backup system. There is no second spaghetti bowl waiting in a closet. When a firm adopts Aladdin, it is not adding a new tool. It is ripping out its entire technology spine and replacing it. Royal London Asset Management, which manages £153 billion, went live on Aladdin in March 2024. Their chief operating officer called the implementation by far the single largest and most complicated program delivery we have ever attempted. It took over 2 years. Franklin Templeton started its own transition in mid-2025. That migration is expected to take several years. Now consider what happens when a firm that spent 2 or 3 years rebuilding its entire operation around one platform decides it wants to leave. Where does it go? Nobody leaves. BlackRock's 2023 Investor Day disclosed a retention rate of 98% over any 3-year window. Of the top 25 clients, 68% increased how much they spend with Aladdin over the past 5 years. Over half of new clients in 2024 signed up for multiple Aladdin products at once, deepening the integration from day one. So what about the firms that did leave? 2 major departures exist in public records. UBS dropped Aladdin in 2025 after acquiring Credit Suisse. UBS already had its own technology infrastructure, and it migrated back to existing systems. Amundi replaced Aladdin after acquiring Pioneer Investments, which had been an Aladdin client. Amundi already had its own platform. No record exists of a major institution leaving Aladdin and building something new from scratch. No contract forces them to stay. That is the part that should unsettle you. A contract can be broken. A dependency, this deep, cannot. And the pattern runs the other direction. BlackRock disclosed a case study at its 2023 Investor Day. An insurance company with a $55 billion portfolio gave BlackRock $1 billion to manage in 2017. By 2020, it started using Aladdin to evaluate its investments. By 2023, it had adopted Enterprise Aladdin across its operations and increased its BlackRock-managed assets to over $32 billion. The platform does not just retain clients, it pulls them deeper. And the pricing structure accelerates the dependency. Revenue is based on the assets being processed and the number of users. As the client grows, the cost grows. As the cost grows, the switching cost grows with it. If this is the kind of financial mechanism you want explained, and not just the headline, subscribe. There is a lot more of this coming. To understand the sheer gravity of this dependency, look at the enterprise footprint. Over 200 institutions rely on Aladdin as their central operating system. 55,000 investment professionals log in every single day. This is not a software subscription. It is critical global infrastructure. And that dependency generated $1.6 billion in recurring technology revenue for BlackRock last year alone. More than 95% of it renews automatically, not because of loyalty, because the clients cannot operate without it. What almost nobody talks about is that Aladdin is not only used by private firms. The Bank of Israel has run its $208 billion in foreign exchange reserves through the platform since 2019. A central bank analyst described how Aladdin lets them monitor both internal investments and external managers in a single daily view. Korea's National Pension Service went live in February 2025. The risk models that central banks use to manage sovereign reserves, money belonging to entire nations, are built and maintained by the world's largest private asset manager. Government-level portfolio data flows through a commercial system that also serves the firms those governments regulate. One platform, one data model, one potential failure point for a significant share of the world's managed assets. And none of this is hidden. It is on BlackRock's investor slides. They present it as a growth story. The fact that sovereign nations running their reserves through commercial software is described as a business achievement rather than a systemic vulnerability tells you how normalized this dependency has become. Larry Fink has said BlackRock's goal is to make Aladdin the language of portfolios. At this point, that is less an ambition than a description of what already exists. Regulators flagged the risk, then shelved it. In 2014, Financial Stability Oversight Council staffers prepared a closed-door presentation that included a draft scorecard specifically for BlackRock solutions. The platform was then processing $13.7 trillion. The Systemic Risk Committee recommended reducing reliance on third-party service providers. BlackRock's vice chairman, Barbara Novick, pushed back. She said managers do not fail. That's not an issue. The Financial Stability Board accepted the argument. Designation of asset managers as systemically important was shelved. No one overruled her. No one legislated against it. The door stayed open, and Aladdin walked through it. Then March 2020 arrived. On March 24th, one day after the Federal Reserve announced emergency bond buying programs to prevent a market collapse, the New York Fed hired BlackRock's Financial Markets Advisory Group to run 3 separate facilities. The published contract is explicit. BlackRock would provide the Federal Reserve with daily risk assessments using BlackRock's Aladdin platform. The program was authorized to purchase up to $750 billion in assets. Actual purchases in the corporate credit facility reached about $14.2 billion. This dual role created immediate structural tension. Public records show that of the first $1.58 billion in ETF purchases through the program, roughly 47% went into BlackRock's own iShares products. On the day BlackRock was hired, its flagship corporate bond fund, LQD, recorded $1.5 billion in single-day inflows, a record. LQD's total assets surged from $28 billion on March 19th to nearly $47 billion by May 20th. BlackRock waived its advisory fees, but the contract's information barrier provisions contained an exception that I had to read twice. Certain BlackRock senior executives were permitted to sit above the wall between the Fed advisory team and the rest of the firm, not below the wall, not beside it, above it. Staff working on the Fed assignment could share general market views and macro investment themes with colleagues outside the firewall. The cooling-off period before those employees could trade on information from the assignment was 2 weeks. That period could be shortened with Fed approval. Every detail in this section comes from published contracts, congressional letters, and BlackRock's own regulatory filings. There is no secret to uncover. The architecture is visible. The question is why nobody changed it. Members of Congress demanded answers. Their letter said that you must ensure that the information, access, and power that BlackRock gets from its work does not make the U.S. government reliant on the firm for managing financial crises. This was not the first time the government had called BlackRock. In 2008, the firm managed Bear Stearns' toxic assets for the Fed, evaluated the balance sheets of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and advised on Citigroup's $300 billion ring-fenced asset pool. Fortune described Fink as the financial crisis's behind-the-scenes fixer. 2 crises. Both times, the same firm, the same platform. The pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. In 2021, Senator Elizabeth Warren pressed Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen at a Senate hearing. Warren said that BlackRock runs a technology platform that currently houses at least 10% of all the stocks and bonds around the world. She asked if a $9 trillion investment company failed, would that likely have a significant impact on our economy? Yellen responded that it is not obvious to her that designation is the correct tool. Warren pushed back, asking, "How are you supposed to know what the risk is if you are not actually doing the investigation?" As of February 2026, no asset manager has ever been designated as systemically important. The obvious question is, why has nobody built a real competitor? Because they cannot replicate time. Aladdin has been in continuous development for 35 years. Every transaction across its 200 institutional clients feeds data back into its risk models. The behavioral patterns of $21 trillion in assets, how portfolios react to rate shocks, credit downgrades, and geopolitical crises, that data cannot be purchased. It does not exist anywhere else. It was accumulated one client, one crisis, one calculation at a time. BlackRock is also Aladdin's biggest customer. Rob Goldstein, now the firm's chief operating officer, described it this way: "This notion of we eat our own cooking brings us to a higher discipline than what we've seen in the market." When BlackRock's own $14 trillion runs alongside external clients on the same platform, development is not theoretical. Flaws get found because BlackRock itself depends on the system working. Then there is the workforce. 55,000 professionals use Aladdin daily. Job postings across the financial industry now list Aladdin experience as a preferred qualification alongside CFA and FRM certifications. Portfolio managers build careers around proficiency in one commercial platform. When an analyst spends 5 years learning Aladdin's interface, its risk language, its workflow logic, switching to a competitor means retraining thousands of employees who have no incentive to start over. That is lock-in at the human level, not just the institution, the people inside it. The only comparable product is SimCorp One, now owned by Deutsche Börse. But SimCorp's strength is accounting. Aladdin's is risk analytics. State Street spent billions acquiring Charles River Development to build a competing system. As of 2026, the components are still being assembled, and the government contracts gave BlackRock something no competitor could buy: managing Bear Stearns' distressed portfolio in 2008, running the Fed's bond-buying operation in 2020. Those assignments provided data on the internal structure of assets at the center of 2 financial crises. That information flowed back into Aladdin, improving the models for every client on the platform. Aladdin is not standing still. In 2024, BlackRock launched Aladdin Copilot, a generative AI layer built into the platform. The Prekin acquisition, which closed in March 2025, brought in private markets data covering more than 4,000 institutional clients. Until now, Aladdin's strength was public markets. Prekin fills the last major gap: private equity, real estate, infrastructure, and hedge funds. The platform is absorbing the data layer for nearly every asset class that exists. Aladdin Climate now calculates physical and transition risk at the individual security level. When the dominant risk platform changes how it scores climate exposure for an asset class, trillions in allocations may shift, not through any directive, but through the mechanics of how risk-weighted decisions are made. Value Act Capital took a stake in BlackRock in 2025. Managing partner Mason Morfitt characterized BlackRock's position as unisaleable, arguing the market dramatically undervalues Aladdin as a technology business. His view is that the platform will move toward automating investment decisions entirely, faster and cheaper than any human team. If you have a pension, a retirement account, or an insurance policy, there is a reasonable chance the institution managing that money runs on Aladdin right now. The question is not whether BlackRock controls the global financial system. That framing misses the point. The real question is what happens when a single commercial platform becomes so embedded in the machinery of global finance that no one, not the institutions using it and not the regulators overseeing them, has a plan for what to do if it fails. The United Kingdom's critical third-party regime, effective January 2025, is the first serious attempt. The FCA has warned that failure of a system like Aladdin could cause serious consumer harm and damage to market integrity. 37 years ago, Larry Fink lost $100 million because he could not measure risk. So he built a machine to fix that problem. Today, that machine measures risk on 10% of the world's financial assets. And the open question, the one nobody has answered, is whether the machine itself has become the risk. If you want to understand how another piece of financial infrastructure silently takes a cut of nearly every transaction you make, that story is next.